Hi, everyone. Um, Welcome back to the second day of Access U. I'm your room host, Deja. I'm going to be facilitating, passing around this mic. Just so if you ever have any questions for Robert Carr, um, please feel free, raise your hand. I'll hand it to you just so that the people on Zoom can hear your questions. Our Zoom monitor today is Serena. She'll be reading out loud any questions that the Zoom participants might have. And yeah, enjoy your second day here at XSU. And I'm going to hand it over to Robert Carr. Yeah.
So today I am going to talk about your internal accessibility program needs a maturity model. To get started, my name is Robert Carr. I am a certified web professional and struggling already. A certified web accessibility professional. I've been doing accessibility for almost 10 years. I started working with a bank, and then I've worked with a broadcaster, and my current role is the internal accessibility lead at Publicis Sapient. And I've previously spoken at A11YTO and the CSUN conference in Toronto. And in my presentation here, I have a link to Robert Carr because there's also a Rob Carr who does accessibility, so there's some confusion sometimes. So I work for a company called Publicis Sapient, and Publicis Sapient is a digital consulting company that helps businesses succeed online by improving their digital tools and strategies like websites and mobile apps to better serve and connect with customers. We have over 20,000 people around the world in 53 different offices. So these are my objectives for today. We'll learn about what an accessibility maturity model is, what one you should use, and how to work with it. Understand that a maturity model is how to use it, and it's helpful for guiding your actions, and it's kind of a starting point and a way to do internal accessibility as a process, and then learn how to learn how to use the information gathered to drive accessibility within the organization and focus your efforts where they'll have the most impact. So what is so why should we do accessibility maturity, or why should we just do accessibility in general? Generally, we would say like it's the right thing to do. We don't want to exclude people. We don't want to discriminate. And it's a human right to have access to information and to use like services online and such. It's also mandated by the law. There are different laws depending on where you live. And I have just two screen captures here. One is of the $6 million National Federation for the Blind versus Target lawsuit. And so that was like a customer. And then there's another one here that has a blind employee settles lawsuit against the Miami County Public School Board. And this was a lawsuit where there was a blind employee and they weren't able to do some of their job because the tools that they were using inside the organization were not accessible. And so the person couldn't do their job. And as a result, they had to fix the website. They also had to fix the tools that this person was using. And so these are kind of two big reasons why you might want to make sure that you have an accessible, mature organization, is because you want your customers and your employees to be able to do their work and access your resources and everything like that. And it's also it's an easy way to become accessible because it's a guide. It tells you what you need to do, and it helps you sort of take the steps necessary to make your organization accessible. So I have this slide here. This is a screenshot, it's a chart, and it's from DQ, and it's showing the cost over time. And it's just, this is kind of like a chart to show you that the longer you wait to deal with accessibility or address accessibility, the more it costs. And I have just like one big point here that says accessibility costs 37.5 times as much if you wait until production. And an example of this would be just if you are in the beginning steps of building your website or building a product, and you don't take 5 minutes to test if the colors that you're using have sufficient contrast. And so that might take 5 minutes. If you have a process in place, you can just test the colors and then you know, okay, we shouldn't use these. But if you ignore that test and wait until you get to production, then someone tells you, oh, well, you have low contrast colors on your page and you need to change them. And then you have to contact your design team and they have to decide which colors to do. And then you have to go to the dev team and they have to go through all the code. And just the idea here is, though, that it takes a whole bunch more time to fix something that if you just did it right in the beginning, it would be really easy and quick. The next slide here is for dedicated people. And it's important to have dedicated people doing your accessibility work. If you have like someone starts up the program and it's just sort of a grassroots thing, doing it on their own, then it's going to be difficult to scale. It's going to be difficult to do in a large organization. And like I said, like the company that I work for is pretty large, and so it would be difficult to do is just sort of on the side. It's a very time-consuming task as well. You might have tons of internal tools that you need to test, and if you or teams that you have to work with. And everyone has a day job, so they already have responsibilities that they're sort of supposed to be doing. And so if you ask them to take on this internal work or to make the organization accessible, they probably have maybe paying clients or whatever that they're supposed to focus their time on instead. And also, it's easy to say accessibility is a priority and that it's important. But if you haven't actually like hired someone to do it, then is it really that important? But I guess probably everyone here is probably already aware that these are sort of important things to consider, keep in mind. And accessibility maturity is going to be a collective effort. So having someone who's sort of dedicated and focused will have the resources and the ability to spend time to think about it and connect with the right people and to maybe push initiatives and such. So accessibility maturity models. So what is an accessibility maturity model? It's a tool or framework to measure an accessibility programs and processes. Rather than directly measuring accessibility, it asks how healthy are your processes or how healthy is your organization. It provides guidance on how well you are doing in your accessibility journey, and it helps guide your actions by finding the areas of the organization that are going to benefit the most from, and that are not sort of where you're doing accessibility well and where you're not doing it well. And I have here just, it's more than accessibility awareness, because yesterday, someone asked me, what is your talk about? And I said accessibility maturity. And he said, oh, like, so anyway, we're talking about issues that are coming up, for example, empty links. And he commented, well, like the team wasn't very mature. And in that sense, he meant, well, they didn't know about accessibility, like they weren't trained a lot. Maybe they didn't have an accessibility specialist. And this is awareness is part of this, but it's also a lot more. Like it's about processes, it's about training, and it is also awareness. So it's a strategic, the strategic importance of the model is it is a systematic process. There's different areas that you look at. There are different stages or phases of those areas, and they're like points, proof points. There are different tasks that you should do. So it's very strategic, like it's very comprehensive. It covers lots of topics. It shows lots of areas. It helps you also guide your strategies for planning, because you know that you need to have like a plan, you need to have a roadmap, you need to start doing the work, and then maybe you start setting up some analytics to make sure that these processes are working. It also is a continuous thing, because there are different steps you can take, and you can also like it's not just a one and done. It could be, but lots of things are taking you need to have your idea, you need to get sort of some support behind it, then you do a plan, and then you develop. So it's just a constant process. It also promotes organizational cultural change, because like part of this is having executive support, is increasing awareness, it's developing training programs. And so all of this is helping change an organization's understanding of what accessibility is and helping to prioritize it. Also too, when you are sort of aware of how well your processes are or how accessible your processes are, then you have a better sense of your risk. So if you just assume that you're doing great at accessibility and you've not actually gathered any data, you don't actually have any support actually for believing that, then you might say, well, like, of course we're creating accessible products, why not? And then you have some sort of random person test and you find out that you're not. So like having this awareness of how well you're doing is going to help you ensure that you actually know how good or bad you are doing. And also improves customer and employee satisfaction, because again, if you have an inaccessible website, then customers are going to not be happy. And if you have inaccessible internal tools, then people might not be able to do their job and they're not going to be happy. So on this slide, which accessibility maturity models should we use? And it's how standards proliferate. It's a comic. It's from XKCD. and it has it has 3 sections. The first one says a situation. There are 14 competing standards. The next one is 14, ridiculous. We need to develop one universal standard that covers everyone's use case. Yay. And then the last slide says the situation, there are now 15 competing standards. And so you could, like, so at CSUN last year, there were lots of people talking about accessibility maturity models. And there were some, I remember hearing some talks about people who had created their own. And it's probably better not to create your own because there are already these existing models that you can use. And so today I'm going to kind of cover I'm going to talk a lot about the W3C accessibility maturity model, but there's also the Level Access Digital Accessibility Maturity Model, the Microsoft Accessibility Evolution Model, and the AbilityNet Digital Accessibility Maturity Model, but there might be other ones that I just am not aware of. So I have for the W3C that it's an assessment template. You can go to the W3C Accessibility Maturity Model website. It's like other W3C content, so it kind of looks like the WCAG standards. There's a lot of rules or sort of explanation, like what this process is, how you do it, like what the different dimensions mean, how you can sort of measure them. But this template is actually, there's a spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet has multiple sheets, and each of the sheets is a different dimension, and a different dimension is an area of your organization that you can work on in developing accessibility maturity. Each dimension has a series of proof points, which are tasks or evidence-based things that you can do or accomplish to progress your accessibility maturity in that domain. And you put if it's passed or not, you mark your stages, and you can make some notes to contain some proof points. So and I will show the actual spreadsheet just after going through like what's in it. And also it's a work in progress. So I know that they're supposed to do an update to this in the spring. So that might be soon or not. Yeah, I just have a link here to the original thing. So who is the audience? The audience is executives or management, maybe subject matter experts. Basically, you want to share this information with people who have the ability to set direction within the organization, because you need to get them to support these plans and to be pushing them and assigning the tasks, creating the tasks to distribute throughout their teams to move the program forward. So one point here is that our goal is progress over perfection. It's pretty hard to make a perfectly accessible organization. And even if you have all the processes in place, you're still going to make mistakes sometimes. And so rather than focusing on being perfect, think about making progress. Maybe you weren't even thinking about accessibility before, but now you are. And maybe next year you've started to develop some training programs, and maybe the year afterwards, you're starting to make sure that everyone in the organization is actually completing them. So there are multiple dimensions to this maturity model. So each dimension represents an aspect of the organization and a place that you can measure accessibility. There are 7 dimensions within the W3C model, which is the one that I'm going to look at. And you don't necessarily need to use a dimension if it doesn't apply to you. If, for example, your organization does not acquire any third-party tools, then you probably don't need to have a procurement dimension. But it depends on your needs of your organization, and it is flexible. You can remove things if they don't apply to you. You can add things if you don't. If you feel the need to add them. And the 7 dimensions are communication, knowledge, skills, support, development, life cycle, personnel, procurement, and culture. So each of these, each of the dimensions has a series of proof points, and these are evidence-supported criteria. They're kind of like the success criteria, like sort of in the same idea of the dimension. And then there is a range of these suggested proof points, which are tasks that you can do. For example, like creating accessible templates for whatever communications that you're doing. And you want to make sure that you are focusing on the specific dimension, because a lot of the dimensions have, like, do you have training? And so you want to make sure that it is procurement training for the procurement section, and internet communications technologies for your ITC. You can also not be completely completed all of the steps in the earlier phases, but if you want to mark it as completed or as or if you finished, then you have to have done every step. And it also kind of tells you what you need to do next. So it's good from like a strategic position. Like if your role is to guide your organization's accessibility, then you can look through the spreadsheet and find some tasks that you haven't started or that you need to work on that you need to do. And it will give you some guidance to help you understand what you need to do. So the first one is communications. And this is ensuring that your internal and external communications are accessible. This could be when you are sharing emails or social media for your website. Also, you want to make sure that it's accessible. Like one thing is like you could, sometimes your social media platforms are not going to be accessible by default, or you need to sort of be careful which type of content you're sharing on there, or maybe you need to make sure that you do additional work to make it more accessible. So this is something that's kind of hard to do. You want to make sure that your online tools that you're using, so your meeting tools, your chat tools, your emails are accessible. And accessible templates and how to use them is an important thing as well. If you're doing internal communications, then you should have templates that are accessible, but you should also probably have training about how to use those templates correctly. Knowledge and skills is ongoing training programs for accessibility implementation. This means like you have training programs, you have training that you're providing for your people. You should probably have like a general accessibility training, but you should also then have specific trainings for different role-based or sort of different roles within the organization. If your organization doesn't have the skills, maybe you want to outsource this to a third party. Maybe you need help with a VPAT. You might want to consult with a third-party consultancy because they'll have the expertise. They'll help you guide your actions and help you understand where you need to go. And yeah, I have here too to start understanding, like one thing you want to do too is maybe you want to do a survey when people join the organization to just ask them how well they're doing at accessibility how well they understand accessibility. And then you can sort of progress to the point where you have role-based trainings that are more in depth for different parts of the job. And also here, just part of the onboarding, subject matter experts, and part of your job requirements. The next area or the next dimension is support. So you have resources and personnel dedicated to supporting accessibility needs. And this is both for your customers and for your employees. Accessibility policy, support mechanisms are accessible. You want to have ways to process and manage accessibility related feedback, and support training is available so that people know what to do. Like I was just thinking of an example for this is that was looking for some client work. I was looking at a comparable website, and I remember looking at this website, and it was so inaccessible. Like you couldn't track your keyboard, like you couldn't use a screen reader. And I went to the support, and I just I don't know why, I just felt like I should tell them that your website's not accessible. And so I went to the support system, and I said, okay, well, there's no keyboard there's no keyboard focus here. It doesn't work with a screen reader. There's empty links, and I said that in the support, and the person said, oh, like I'll tell that to the right person. But if they have no accessibility awareness, they don't know that accessibility is a thing that they need to care about, no one's gone through training, then like it was probably just like some random person on the internet complaining, and they just put me in the pile of other complaints. So people need to understand or have to have some understanding of accessibility in order to be able to take feedback that they're getting and understand that it's valid and that it can actually be useful. ICT development lifecycle. This is information and communication technologies. Like I work mostly in web accessibility, and so this is sort of the domain mostly. And so we want to make sure that we have access across you're doing accessibility throughout the whole process, through the design or from planning to design to development, even your testing and maintenance. You need to have accessibility in place. So maybe you're using checklists to ensure that people are testing things correctly, that they know what to look for to make sure that what they've created is accessible. You want to also do user research, including people with disabilities, because maybe you're going to get feedback that you don't necessarily expect or just people who do it as a job might not necessarily have the same experiences as someone who uses it by necessity. And you also want to have, like I should have said this in the beginning, but your website, your software, your hardware is accessible. That's like sort of the critical endpoint of this dimension. And then also a consistent approach to testing and conformance reporting to ensure that you are consistent in your reporting, because like you could just have like some random person test one page and they're like, this is totally accessible, and then you have like you've gone through like the whole VPAT process for another tool, and so you have a different scale of understanding. And in our organization, we have an internal tool that we use that is sort of like a quick test, but then we also have like a complex, thorough, complete accessibility audit assessment. So and we need to use those tools so that there's consistency in our reporting, because when we're looking at sort of a whole category of websites, then we want to make sure that all of them, or sorry, that we're comparing them equally and fairly, instead of just saying that one is accessible and the others are not, or whatever. Personnel. So this is about making sure that when you're hiring people, or that the people within your organization, that they have accessibility awareness. And so part of this is putting accessibility as a part of the job description. So this might mean saying having a best to have or required skills of accessibility awareness. Also, you want to make sure that you are using an accessible platform. Your hiring platform is accessible. Like it would be pretty embarrassing if you sent out an email saying like, we're looking to hire people with disabilities because this is a priority for us, and then when they went to your website, they couldn't actually apply for a job. We want to have resource groups, which are going to help people with disabilities, but also they help increase awareness of accessibility. And we want to have accommodations for support and monitoring for people with disabilities. This is like, it's about sort of helping your people. Procurement. So this is the process of acquiring third-party tools. You want to have a strategic acquisition of accessible products and services. Like one thing to think about here is that if you are doing a good job of making your organization accessible and having accessibility maturity, then you don't want to just choose some third party and use their tool throughout your organization if they're not at the same level as you are as far as accessibility is concerned, because then you're sort of starting over again, or you're going back to the start again. And this is something that I've worked on a procurement process, but we're not asking. Before in the past, we might not have asked companies for accessibility as a part of the requirements, and then they give us their tool, and then we have to use up some of the cycles of customizations and stuff to make it accessible. And it's kind of, because it doesn't make sense that you help the vendor make their tool accessible. It should be accessible from the start, right? And you're using up some of your time for customizations or whatever to get that done. So it's important to make sure that they're actually accessible from the beginning. So part of that is about having a policy in place. Part of it is asking for accessibility documentation about how accessible they are, ensuring that in the contract, there's a requirement from the vendor to actually address accessibility issues that are identified. And like in the end, you might be blocking a vendor because they're inaccessible. So if they don't have a VPAT, or if they have no accessibility awareness, then we just don't work with them when we go with the other end vendor. That's like takes a lot of time because it's hard. There's probably not a lot of vendors who are actually completely accessible. And so you might be, you cut off half of the potential companies or vendors if you require accessibility. So that takes time. And I think too, for procurement, if everyone starts asking their vendors to be accessible, then they start to have to do it, and then it might become easier. And finally, a culture that is positive towards accessibility and disability. I also want to have people with disabilities involved in decision making. You need to have executive sponsorship. You need to have and I think something happened here. Oh, it's just showing up on mine. So sorry. You need to have executive sponsorship. You need to have someone at the top of the organization who is prioritizing accessibility and pushing it forwards, because it's a lot harder to get people to care about something if their boss hasn't told them that it's a priority, that it's an important thing. And then also we want to accessible training and build and maintain skills. Also, like just having like a general accessibility training that everyone has to do is like a good way to start the process of building an accessibility or an accessible culture. Okay, so the next step here. Next is the conformance levels. And so these are sort of the stages of conformance to accessibility maturity. And I have a picture here. It's of a pyramid, like a stone pyramid. And at the bottom or at the base, it says inactive. Next is launch. Next is integrated. And finally is optimized. And generally, your organization can be at different levels. So maybe your procurement process is optimized, but your culture, well, I guess your culture would probably have to have made some progress. But maybe your internal tools yourselves, like your ICT technology, has less maturity. So it's possible to have different levels of maturity. You don't have to be the same across the board, but you do want to make sure that you're going through the processes, that you're following the steps. And again, I have this here, just like you can't necessarily be perfect, but if you're making progress, then you're headed in the right direction. So inactive is the first stage, and this is like no awareness or recognition of the need for accessibility. You are not making any efforts towards it, and you definitely do not want to be at this stage. This is the stage that you're at if you don't really take accessibility serious. Maybe you don't even know that accessibility is a thing. When we launch, we recognize the need throughout the organization. Planning's been initiated, but activities are not well organized. So you might have plans, but they're not complete, or they've just started, but they're not finished. You might have training that is sort of happening randomly. Maybe you do it once a year or every 6 months, but it's not a thing that's required for people to complete, and it might just be general. Your accessibility efforts are limited to your new products. So maybe you've started to build your processes and you're working on accessibility, but it's just the latest site that is accessible. You've not even looked at or considered the possibility of fixing any of your old sites or your old tools that people are using. You're encouraging people with disabilities to apply for jobs. You have started to think about how to make your procurement process accessible, and you have identified leadership who is behind accessibility, which I think is pretty critical to getting this whole thing moving. The next stage is integrated, and so this is where you have a roadmap in place. Overall organizational approach is defined and well organized. So maybe you have some metrics that are in place, and hiring practices are accessible, or they have accessibility in mind at least. Maybe you're asking people if they need accommodations during interviewing. Your vendors might have to supply some documentation, and it might be a part of the evaluation, but it's not like a blocker at this point. You have started some skill or role-based trainings. So you might have like a general training that everyone does, but your developers have a series of trainings that they need to do. Your procurement team might have a series of trainings that they need to do. Your tools and processes are in place to accommodate accommodation requests from your employees. And your trainings metrics might be established, but maybe you're not completely collected. Accessibility communications might have a roadmap, but it's not. And you have a roadmap, but it's not in use every time, or it's not complete. Last stage is optimized. So you've incorporated accessibility into the whole organization. It's consistently evaluated, and actions are taken on assessment outcomes. This is pretty hard to do because, like, how can you be perfect all the time? But at least if you have the processes in place, then you have a better chance of doing this. And so this would assume that all your communications are accessible. But I know, like, even if you develop a process and you have training and people know what to do, like sometimes people are going to make mistakes. Maybe someone's new starts and they don't go through the training, and they somehow are given a job to post something on social media, and they forget about accessibility, or they don't even know that they need to do it. You also will want to, at this point, you'll have like all your roles or all your jobs are including accessibility requirements, like either as as a requirement or a needs to have. You want to have support staff is fully trained and able to support users. You have release management might include some testing. So maybe you have like Axe as part of the build process, and if Axe identifies any issues or errors, then you don't move forwards. Employees with disabilities hold critical decision-making positions. Accessibility is critical to procurement. Maybe before you're asking, do you have procurement, or sorry, do you have accessibility documentation for your tool or your product? Now you're actually saying like, no, we won't hire you, or sorry, won't take you on or not. And accessibility is, everyone understands it throughout the organization as a priority. And so this is like the sort of optimized stage of the accessibility maturity. This is probably going to be hard to get to, and this is going to happen after you've taken some time. So once you've, so once you've gone through the assessment and you filled in the information, you have an idea of where you are, then you want to make sure that you're focusing on your weaknesses. So the areas where you're not doing so well, maybe you want to put some more resources into that area of the organization to help push accessibility forward a little bit. I'm just going to click this for a second. Might be easier at the end. Okay, so I just here, this is just the W3C accessibility maturity model spreadsheet. And like I had, so this is a spreadsheet, and this is like I guess like a sort of like a physical way that you can sort of keep track of this, and you can see where you're at and everything. Like really, this is overall accessibility maturity as a process. It's about setting up plans and following through with them. But there is this spreadsheet to sort of help guide you. And so there's a cover here, and then this page here is a tally. So it just has each of the dimensions, and it shows you just what percentage of for each dimension, like what stage you're at, to just give you a sense here. And it's looking to see if how many are optimized. So this is just made up data. So I just sort of filled this in. And so there's only just one point that's been optimized. And so I'm just going to look at this communication slide and try and zoom in a little bit. So here is these, we're looking at, when did we do the assessment? The scope, so it was the whole organization, maybe, or you just looked at this dimension. It then covers the goals for each stage, and so what are you trying to accomplish, and then some outcomes descriptions of what that means, which is basically what was in the slides before. But then here we have the outcomes or the proof points, and so just this one here is accessible corporate document templates. And so this is a task that we need to accomplish, and this is something that you can start like planning for. So the first part is like you've done nothing for the inactive stage, but maybe at the launch stage, you have realized and you've assigned some people to work on it. Then maybe the integrated stage, you are starting to develop those documents, you have training available, and then at the optimized stages, people are using those all the time. They've gone through that training and they're making accessible presentations or using accessible templates all the time. So this though, like there's just lots of different steps and tasks that you can do. And those are, like I generally covered them in the previous slides, but if you actually open up the spreadsheet, like you download the spreadsheet and then look at it, then it will give you lots of things that you can do and that you can that your organization can work on. And also part of it is going to be looking at all of these tasks and deciding which ones are the most appropriate to take on. Just going through, so some areas have, some dimensions have more tasks than others. But yeah, just wanted to share, to just see what this looks like. But really, accessibility maturity is the process of doing all of this. This is a way to track it and to see how well you're doing. But that's, okay, now I lost my slides. So just a second. Okay, so once we have gone through, once we've gone through our assessment and we know where we're at, then we want to start focusing on our weaknesses or the areas where we haven't done enough. So how can we gather information to help fill in the spreadsheet? Or sorry, Gathering information and strategic measures. Okay, so one thing is important, the importance of gathering data. So you want to start with a baseline. Like you could do this like right away. You could start assessing maturity, but you probably want to start, or so you want to wait a little bit so that you have some time to get started. That can be your sort of starting point, your baseline, and then you can build up from there. The more information that you gather, the better you are going to be at making decisions. Because if you know that you're doing well somewhere, or you know what you've accomplished so far, then you can better dedicate resources to that. But also you can have a better idea of how long it's going to take to accomplish it. It's also a good way to keep track of progress. And again, it's the risk management thing, is that if you have accurate data and you have an accurate sense of how well you're doing, then you understand, you have a better sense of what your risks are and where you need to be careful. And again, better resources allocation. If you don't know, if you don't gather data, then everything's going to be a guess, and people are probably want to think that they're doing well. They want to believe that they're doing well, even if they might not be doing that. And I guess this kind of leads into this next one, which is about an honest assessment. So you do definitely want to make sure that you are being honest, because if you are wearing rose-colored glasses, then it won't help you, and it might make the situation worse. If you are saying that you're doing really well accessibility, but your outcomes are not as good as you would hope or as you're promising, then that's going to be bad for trust. People are not going to trust the accessibility team. It's also bad for transparency, because if there's this tendency to overestimate how well we're doing, then it's not going to look good. Also, a low score isn't necessarily bad. If you're just getting started, you shouldn't expect to be doing great. You should be expecting that you have lots of space for improvement. And also you want to be accurate, because it just makes the whole process better when you're honest and clear about what's actually going on. So just some methods for gathering information. One thing that you could do is you could consult with a third party. They'll have independence, and so that might be helpful because you get a better sense of how well you're doing. If you're reporting internally, you might be a little bit more inclined to be more favorable. But that would come with a cost, of course, and that might come with using their maturity model instead of the one that you want to use. You want to ask the staff and leaders, so you want to mix people, because maybe the management or the leader of the team has a different idea of what's going on than what's actually happening at the ground. So you want to mix people so that you're getting an even sort of spread of information. You can do it through interviews or group sessions. Or you can, depending on if you have a big team or a distributed team, or maybe you have like one area that is very big to your organization, you might even send out surveys to gather information. And then you can follow up with individuals who have more information. So the idea of this, this is a framework for measurement, but how it's useful, or why it's an important thing, is that it's structured. So like I said, there's all these proof points. They're telling you all these tasks that you need to complete. It tells you the different steps that you need to go through to accomplish them. And so it's a very sort of comprehensive way of looking at it. And it's easy to make sure, or to measure where you're at, because you actually have to have proof for it. And this kind of relates to the outcome-based assessment, because again, you haven't started if you don't have a plan. And if you have a plan, then has that plan been actioned and completed? Do you have a dashboard? Are you actually collecting data to show your progress? Again, same thing. Long-term planning, because once you sort of know how long it takes to complete a series of tasks, then you can also plan future tasks you can do. Maybe if developing a training program for a department takes this much time, once you've done that once, then you can be better prepared to do it the next time, but also you have a better idea of how long it takes. And then it's level-specific goals. So maybe that means you're planning, and then you have your roadmap. Then you actually have built something, and then you're keeping track of its success. And finally, focus area, which is just you can focus on the areas that need the most effort. So continuous improvement framework. So I kind of talked about this, and then to say it again, that you're focusing on growth rather than perfection, because it's going to be hard to do everything perfect. You want to prioritize incremental progress and learning. Like once you've done it once, then you have a better idea how to do it next time. Also, like because you're keeping track of like you've planned and you've done work, then like you're actually having success throughout the whole process. It's not like you must just have a dashboard that's tracking all your training. Like you develop the training, you plan the training, you have different steps. So there's steps to accomplish, but also those are small wins that you can use to motivate other people to do the work as well. And also because there are sort of a planned or there are steps to complete, then you have an idea of what you need to do in the future. It's iterative, which is good because like you can do your first assessment and see where you're at, then you can adjust, and then you can sort of track your progress. And also, I have here just the changing priorities based on an organizational need. Maybe the organization is in the process of acquiring a new tool, and so you might not have had an accessible procurement process to start with, but now that you have the need for this tool, then you can start building it and working on it because it's something that's important for the organization at the time. So yeah, and then here, this is just like a sort of a standard roadmap. And the first step here is saying assess your current state of accessibility maturity, and then we set clear objectives and priorities and initiatives. This is kind of like the launch steps here. Developing a timeline, engaging the stakeholders, and allocating the resources is kind of integrated. And set your measurable outcomes and then iterate and improve. It's kind of optimized. But this is just like a sort of a standard roadmap. And the key here, though, is that we do the accessibility maturity. We go through the spreadsheet. We look at all our progress for all our different initiatives and all our different processes. And then we can use that information to guide our next series of actions. And I guess, too, it's going to depend on how big your team is and how you can allocate resources. And so just to sort of conclude here, an accessibility maturity model is a strategic tool for assessing the state of an accessibility program. It emphasizes growth over perfection, focusing on an iterative process. So it's a starting point rather than a goal. Helps discover strengths and weaknesses, allowing focus on where it will have the greatest effect, and a guided approach to advancing organizational maturity levels and leveling results, and then provide actionable steps based on insights and assessments, and regularly review processes and adapt strategies for sustainable growth. I just read the slides, so it's less interesting. So yeah, that covers everything, and so I guess now we have time for questions.
So one question that we had in the chat on Zoom is, do you include vendor accessibility review during the contract stage?
So I guess that's going to depend on your how much of that's going to depend on how mature maybe your procurement process is, because like when we were doing it, we had built the process, and then we had made it a requirement, and then we were telling the vendors that we wanted them to have accessible tools, and they would give us a VPAT if they had it, or they would answer some of our questions, and that would be potentially a decision if they were doing a good job with accessibility. We would sort of say, okay, we prefer this option over this option, but I guess it's going to depend on how important, like how mature your accessibility is for the procurement process, because like maybe your team or you're not in a position to say no to a vendor because they're not accessible. So, but it would be before you sign a contract, you would want to know how accessible they were. That would for sure make the most sense.
The question was if it was possible to get access to the spreadsheet and the slide deck in the Zoom chat, like a link sent over.
The spreadsheet is just if you look up the W3C accessibility maturity model, then it's the W3 website, and the spreadsheet is on there. It's I'm not sure exactly where it is, but it is on that page, pretty close to the top. And the slides, I'm not sure. Does this do they share the slides? Yeah. Yeah, they should be. There should be somewhere where there's shared.
Hi, Ron. Jeff Klein, consultant, and thank you for the presentation on the W3C maturity model. I'm actually one of the architects of that model, and it's really refreshing to see that somebody is out there looking at it, and you did a great job of explaining a lot of the components of it. So thank you very much. There are some, it's been constant revision. We're looking at version 1 coming out in hopefully in June or July of this month. We're just doing some cleanup on it. And the spreadsheet has been revised for better usability and clarity and a number of other things, which I think is an improvement. And going back to your first slide, where you talked about where you had the cartoon where they had 14 things and then they had somebody, the goal of the W3C model is to become the universal maturity model that everybody lands on, just like, the VPAT was the, the templates that everybody uses for reporting compliance on a product. And so the other thing I wanted to mention, it's kind of implicit in the model, but when you look at the points, and I realize I think there's 156 of them over mentioned, it actually becomes a product plan. So you can actually look at those and say, okay, this is our project plan. Maybe you want to take a few off or, delete a dimension if it's not applicable. But then you can actually use that to guide you. And each one of those proof points, you can assess the maturity level for each one of those proof points. And that's how at the end it scores and gives you the average of it and everything. And one of the reasons that we feel we developed this model and we feel that it's important is because, like you mentioned in there, the level access maturity model, well, that's a proprietary model and you have to engage with level access to be able to have them, assess things for you. And so this one will be, publicly available and should be very pervasive across the industry. So again, thank you for presenting. You did a great job of explaining it and appreciate it.
Hi, I have a question. In my organization, we build software and I'm responsible for the accessibility of all of that, but I am not responsible for my entire company. So like, I don't know what they're doing in procurement. I could find out, but I'm wondering if it makes sense for me to have an accessibility maturity model that doesn't include certain things, or if I should just, give them all zeros and worry about them later and fill in the information I do know.
Like if you're doing the ICT, but that's your dimension, right? So that would be the one that you had the most information about. So you could try and fill out that one based on your knowledge or like the processes that you're doing within your area of the organization. Like for me, I do work with teams, but I've just been pulled into projects dealing with the different dimensions. So I became aware of what was going on. And so I kind of gathered information just by being aware of it. I didn't necessarily come in from the top. I was more like, we need someone who has accessibility experience to help us with this process. And so that's how I gained knowledge about that, is just by being pulled into it.
Yeah, that didn't really answer my question.
Oh.
So,
Okay, I was going to respond.
Yeah.
Just responding.
I don't know whether this would be any help for you, but really sounds to me what your organization is lacking is accessibility corporate-wide policy and driving accessibility from the top down and looking at all those things. And so, as Rob mentioned, there's different ways to do that. One way is to get a third party, somebody to go in there and talk to your leadership about accessibility. There could be a champion who's already in place who might be willing to take it on. But, and I think using the model for procurement would be great for you to do.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, I would
Okay. Yeah. Sounds like you guys are ready for a corporate-wide policy and accessibility and using something like a maturity model to drive it.
We have one right here first.
So my question is, so I actually am at that level across the whole company and responsible for all of this and putting together the maturity model framework that's going to handle everything across the board. But my question comes into place where, yes, we can leverage what the W3C has out there for or beginning, the work that's for here in the States. But then when it comes to what's being used outside of the States or what could be used outside of the States, I don't know if there's anything similar that looks to specific items that should be addressed or should be maybe looked at a little bit closer than we would here. I don't know if there is any differences or if we should use the same across the board. I don't know how it would fit. Like, I know specifically for my company, we would definitely modify some things, and we have over the years. But for something like globally, so now I have to look at things globally. I'm not sure if there are there's areas I should be more focused on, and I don't know if there's anything out there like for an APAC region or a EMEA region that would be helpful when thinking about the maturity model.
I would assume that the underlying processes or steps that you're accomplishing are leading up to creating, like, filling in those gaps that are required by the different requirements for the regions. Like, I think there's like having your accessible presentations, like, that's not relating to any specific law, but if you have accessible presentations, then you're creating the ability to share that information in an accessible way. So I don't know. I feel like maybe if you looked at the details of it.
I have looked at it, but
Uh-huh.
it was a little sometime back. But yes, I have looked at
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Because, like, I wonder if there's like something that you feel that's missing, like, you can add it, right? And then you can sort of work on that, like, build.
Yeah, and I
that.
think it would be, and maybe it would just boil down to having discussions with the other areas of, the accessibility leaders in the other areas, like in our APAC region or something like that, seeing if there's something that's a little bit different to them when we ask them about the process that they would use, maybe culturally or something. There's something different, right? And I don't know that. I don't have any eyes into that. So maybe having more discussions with them and research would be helpful. Yeah. Okay.
Did you have? All right.
So I'm sorry to keep kind of, interrupting, but the W3C model, we've got subject matter experts from all over the world that are working on this thing. And so it's designed to be geography agnostic. So, it should be, there's no standard that we cite in there anywhere. I think maybe I don't think there's a standard, a technical standard or the EN standards or anything. So it can be used. It was designed to be worldwide, and but you can always modify it as you need for your own use.
We're going to open the floor to the Zoom really quickly.
Okay, we had a couple questions from the Zoom. How do you collect data for the assessment? For example, surveys, one-on-one interviews, document reviews, audits. And then how long does an assessment typically take from start to finish?
Like, when we did it, it did take quite a long time because there was like a delay in asking for people to find the right people to ask the questions to. I'm not sure I can really give a good answer for that because you kind of have to determine how big your organization is. You have to figure out your questions that you're going to ask and how you're going to use them to assess what that means as far as their position in the steps. So I'm not sure if I've given a good answer for that one.
Collecting data assessment.
Like, I'm not trying to answer that.
The questions were, how do you handle discrepancies in maturity across departments or business units?
Sorry, I'm not really sure how to answer. Like, how did like, I guess you're going to have to use the different pieces of data or your the different views, and then try and determine what the accurate sort of position is. Like, if someone is saying they're doing really well and someone is not saying they're well, maybe you have to kind of go in the middle. Sorry. These are good questions.
I actually was just going to respond a little bit to that one because in my organization, there are times where you get the discrepancies with how folks are doing their process, especially I focus on what happens externally to our external customers. And then we have folks that internally are working with employee specific things, right? So there's obviously going to be some discrepancies there. And when there is, we do also have an overlaying ADA firm-wide that would come in and be able to provide more guidance. Also, they're the ones that put in like the company policy. So I think when you have those types of things, it's good to have that overarching accessibility umbrella that would help to decide on how you should move forward.
Any more questions? There's still like 30 minutes to this session, so feel free.
How often should the maturity assessment be repeated is the question.
So like Viva was saying, it's going to depend on how quickly your organization is able to action things. Maybe it could be like every 6 months, maybe it could be every year, but it's going to really depend on how mature your team is, like how many people you have working on these tasks. Like if you're not making much progress, then there's no point on reassessing. So it's going to really depend on how well your organization is doing, how many people can work on it.
Any more questions or comments to create some discourse? All right. Are you good? All right.
Okay.
So we're at the end of this session. For those that came in a little later, the sign-in sheet is in the front right here. There's one more.
Can you share examples of how this model led to meaningful change or investment?
Well, like, so from my perspective, like what I had mentioned, like I was pulled in on tasks, and we did like a maturity model a long time ago and reached out to different teams and had a sense of how they were doing, and that helped us sort of gather the data. But I think that, so I guess just some background. At CSUN last year, I did a presentation about how we did the accessibility maturity model, or how we did internal accessibility. And when I did that talk, I realized that it was, well, a lot of the things that we just sort of happened to be doing and fell upon were actually parts or dimensions of the accessibility maturity model. And so having done that talk and then seeing that lots of people were talking about accessibility maturity models, that's why I did this talk, is because I thought the idea of like the actual model itself was interesting. I've done an accessibility maturity model in the beginning. I did one like 2 years ago or so. And then I've been just doing the work kind of ad hoc, and it's kind of just falling into being parts of accessibility. It's falling into the parts of the accessibility maturity model. So like, I guess like a good example is the procurement process. We were asked to be involved in that. So I worked with the team, kind of got a sense of their process and what they were doing. We made suggestions. They had sort of feedback, they had pushback. They're like, well, we can't make this survey or this questionnaire be a requirement for our vendors. And so we sort of had to work with them slowly back and forth to figure out what they were able to take on, what they were able to do. And so maybe we wanted to get them to block a vendor because it wasn't accessible, but it came down to, well, what we can do for now is we can gather information about how accessible our vendors are. And then we can use that information to sort of plan for our next step. So I don't know that I answered the question great. Probably not, but yeah.
Hands. We're all good. We're all set. Awesome. All right, let's give it up for Robert Carr, guys.